Hello and welcome to the fourth segment of TechMar's Snow Melting Training webinar series. This segment, segment 4, is going to focus on TechMar's newest snow melting control, the 654. We're going to focus on the applications for this control. There are 7 featured applications that the control was designed to accommodate. We'll look at each of those applications, just the mechanical drawings, so that you have an appreciation for what this control was designed to operate. The outline for the presentation is to begin by looking at the equipment compatibility for the SnowMelt Control 654. What types of equipment is this control designed to operate? Then we'll take a closer look at the wiring terminals for the control so you have an idea of the possibilities we have as far as configuration is concerned. And lastly, we'll take a look at the mechanical diagrams for the 7 featured applications for the SnowMelt Control 654. So the heat source that the 654 has been designed to accommodate can be an electrical contactor for electrical snowmelt applications. We can also control an on-off boiler or a modulating boiler. As far as the distribution is concerned, we can operate a system pump. Now, when we do operate the system pump, it requires an isolation relay, as you will see when we look at those application diagrams. And for a mixing device, the 654 can operate a 0 to 10 volt DC or 4 to 20 milliamp mixing device. So a little bit different from our previous snowmelt controls. We are now using an analog signal to control the mixing device. Here's a close-up of the wiring terminals. On the right-hand side, you can see we have our terminal strips for the snowmelt sensor. So if we are installing a 090 or 094, we will connect the brown, yellow, blue, red, and black from the sensor to the 654. If we are installing a 095, so the aerial mounted snow sensor, then of course we don't have that brown wire. We're going to be using the yellow, blue, red, and black. We also have a terminal for an outdoor sensor or a boiler return sensor. So this is a shared terminal between an outdoor sensor and a boiler return sensor. For the boiler supply or the mix supply sensor, depending on the application. Now, if we move past the sensor inputs, we have our plus-minus modulating output that can go to a mixing device or to a mod boiler. So this is the 0 to 10 volt or 4 to 20 milliamp modulating output. We also have our TN4 connection. So yes, this is a TN4 compatible snowmelt control that you've all been anxiously waiting for. You can see over here we have 2 additional relays, an auxiliary relay and a heat relay. And I want to point out that both of these are tied to the R. So the heat relay would be operating your boiler, and the auxiliary relay is going to be operating an alert device or a system pump. Now, because we are tied to an R, if we're using the heat relay to provide an enable signal to a boiler, we don't want that to be a wet contact. We want a dry contact, so that would require an isolation relay. And if we are using the auxiliary relay to go to a pump, then our 24 volt is obviously insufficient and we would need another isolation relay for that. And we'll take a closer look at that coming up here. So we have 7 featured applications for the 654. A single zone with a boiler. We have a single zone with a boiler and a new feature for TechMar, the Tandem snow ice detection, and we'll discuss that when we get to application 2. We can do a single snowmelt zone with a modulating steam valve. We can also incorporate the 654 into a larger system that has space heating and DHW, and we can do that because now, of course, we have the TN4 communication. We're also going to look at a multi-zone system where we have a boiler and we're doing mixing, a multi-zone car wash, and a multi-zone electric application. Starting with application 1, where we have our single zone with boiler. Now here, the 654 is operating a hydronic snow melting system, and we're using a modulating boiler and a system pump. So you can see we have the 654 operating the system pump and giving that enable signal and the modulating signal to a modulating boiler. The boiler is piped in primary secondary to the snow melt system to allow the system pump to operate continuously during melting or idling, while allowing the boiler and the boiler pump to turn on and off as required. So when we are in melting, idling, or storm operation, and we'll discuss those different states later in the training series, our system pump is going to operate continuously, so we'll have constant flow. Now, our boiler and our boiler pump can turn on and off as required, and because we're piped in primary secondary, this system pump can run continuously. Boiler firing rate is modulated using 0 to 10 volt DC or 4 to 20 milliamp signal, and our slab is heated to maintain the slab target temperature. Now this would only be if we, of course, are measuring our slab temperature. So you can see on the right-hand side, we are showing 3 sensor options. Option 1, which is a 090 or 094 snow ice sensor, and that, of course, gives us the automatic start and stop. Option 2 is our 095 snow sensor. So this is our aerial sensor. And of course, as we learned in the previous training block, this sensor does not measure the slab temperature. So we recommend combining option 2 with option 3. Option 3 being your slab sensor 072 or 073. Now I did mention the use of relays if we're doing a boiler enable and operating a system pump, and I wanted to show you this slide to make sure it's well understood why that's necessary. As we mentioned, the heat relay and the auxiliary relay are both tied to the 24 volt R. If we are requiring a boiler enable signal, as shown here, we of course want a dry contact. We don't want a wet contact, which we don't have. So we're going to connect a wire from the heat relay to the isolation relay 003. And the other side will go back to C. And that way, whenever that heat relay closes, we have a dry contact enable signal to our boiler. Now let's take a look at the system pump. The auxiliary relay is tied to that 24 volt R. So we have R from the transformer coming through to the auxiliary relay. When that closes, it's going to the isolation relay 003 back to our C. And then we can connect our pump. We'll have 120 line voltage coming up through 8 on our isolation relay, having 6 connect to our pump, and then going from our pump to ground and neutral. So we only need this isolation relay in scenarios where we want to enable our boiler at the TT. And this relay is required to operate the system pump because, of course, this is 24 volt, not 120 as needed for a pump. Now let's move on to application 2. Application 2 shows a single zone where we're operating the boiler and we are doing tandem snow ice detection. Now we will talk about the tandem snow ice detection feature at length later in the training presentation. Right now we'll just give you an overview of what this is. We have a single snowmelt zone, and in this single zone we are going to install 2 snow ice sensors, 090 or 094. Now reasons we might want to do that would be if it is a particularly large snowmelt zone. So imagine an extremely long driveway where perhaps one snow ice sensor isn't representative of the entire snowmelt area. We can also choose to do this if we want to have some redundancy. So we want a fail-safe. In case one of those sensors should fail, we want to have some backup operation. And if you are desiring operation such as that, then the tandem snow ice detection would be for you. Because we have 2 snow ice sensors, we of course need 2 654s. And you'll notice we have labeled one of them as the master and one of them as the member. So the master 654 is the control that is operating the boiler, it's operating the system pump, it's getting the boiler supply data. And the member 654 is only connected to that secondary snow ice sensor, and it's communicating that information to the master control. So as I said, we will discuss this at length later in the presentation. This is just a quick preview of it as it pertains to application 2. So application 2, we are operating this modulating boiler. This modulating boiler requires an enable signal. And remember, when we have that enable signal, we require an isolation relay. Another isolation relay is required to operate our system pump. Now let's move on to application 3. Application 3 shows a single zone with a modulating steam valve. So in this case, the Snowmelt Control 654 is operating a modulating steam valve and a system pump. The heat source in this case may be either district steam or a steam boiler. And slab temperature is controlled by adjusting the steam valve position using an analog 0 to 10 volt DC or 4 to 20 milliamp signal. So you can see we are using that modulating output to operate the steam valve, and it is the 0 to 10 volt DC or 4 to 20 milliamp signal. We are also operating a system pump, and remember, because our auxiliary contact is connected to the R, we do need to use the isolation relay 003 to operate that system pump. Again, we have our 3 sensor options. We have the 090 or 094 automatic snow ice sensor, and that will give us the automatic start and stop. We have option 2, which is the snow sensor 095. And using this option would give us automatic start and time stop. But unless we combine it with option 3, we would have no way of controlling the slab temperature because we're not measuring it with the 095. If we combine option 2 with option 3 and install a slab sensor 072 or 073, then we do have the automatic start with time stop together with slab temperature control, which is our best option if we don't go with option 1 being the automatic snow ice sensor. Application 4 shows a single zone when we're combining our snowmelt system with a larger system that is operating some space heating and domestic hot water. So we have our 654 that's connected to a wiring center. The wiring center here will be connected to a house control. And the house control is going to be operating the on-off boiler, it's going to be operating the domestic hot water, this boiler system pump here, and it will also be taking care of the mixing for the space heating zones. So we'll take a look at the next slide in which we are shading everything that's being operated by the house control. So you can see everything here operated by the house control has been faded, and we're only going to focus on what is being operated by the 654. So in this case, we have our system pump 2 that is going to our heat exchanger. On the other side of our heat exchanger, we have a mixing injection pump. So this would be using that modulating output, so we can use a mixing injection pump that takes a 0 to 10 volt DC signal. And then we have our snowmelt system loop. We have a single zone, and we're also showing our sensor options, the 090 or 094, the 095, and the 072 or 073. You'll notice we have a freeze protection aquastat here. So in this case, we want to protect the source side of the heat exchanger, so the water side. The other side is the glycol, and so we don't have to worry about that, but we do need to worry about the water side or the source side of the heat exchanger. So by connecting that pump through a freeze protection aquastat, whenever these temperatures near freezing, we're going to turn off this pump. You'll notice there is no isolation relay for system pump 1 or for system pump 2. And that's because, as you can see here, it's not connected to the 654. The 654 has been connected to a wiring center, and the wiring center is operating that system pump. The wiring center is also operating system pump 2. Another thing I want to draw your attention to is here we have our boiler return sensor. So in this application we want to do boiler protection. So we have a boiler return sensor, and that's going to be connected to the 654. Now if you remember, on the terminal strip there is a shared terminal between the boiler return and outdoor sensor. So because we're connecting this boiler return sensor to the 654, it means we cannot connect an outdoor sensor directly to the 654. But because we're connected to a house control, we can connect an outdoor sensor to the house control, and that information is communicated through TechMarNet to the 654. Here's our fifth application, which is a multi-zone application where we're operating a boiler and doing some mixing to the snowmelt zones. We have 2 snowmelt zones in this case. Each one is being controlled by its own 654. We're showing you the 3 sensor options, the use of the 090 or 094, the snow sensor 095, and the slab sensor 072 or 073. You can see we are connected to a TN4 system. We have a reset module on the left-hand side and a zone manager on the right-hand side. The reset module will be operating the boiler. We'll be operating this boiler system pump here, and we'll also be operating the mixing device. And each of these zone pumps will be operated by the zone manager. So the 654s will be connected to the zone manager for that pump operation, and that's why we don't need any isolation relays in this case, because the pumps are not being directly controlled by the 654. You can see there is also a freeze protection aquastat, and that is again to protect the source side of the heat exchanger. So if these temperatures do approach freezing, then in this case we cannot stop the operation of this pump because we need this pump to be on for flow through the boiler. We will cut power to both of these zone pumps instead. And we'll look at the wiring of this freeze protection aquastat when we get to the technical training segment, which will be our very last training segment, number 8 in this TechMar Snowmelt Training webinar series. Application 6 is our multi-zone car wash. Now, in this application, we can have, again, up to 12 bays. So here we have shown 2 car wash bays, each with its own 654. But we can connect up to 12 for a larger car wash system. Each of those zones has a 654. You'll notice in this case we're not showing all of the snowmelt sensor options, because for a car wash bay, really all we're looking for is the slab temperature. We're not looking at automatic operation because we need those zones to operate whenever the car wash is open for business. So we just show the slab sensor 072 or 073 going to each of those 654s. You'll notice one of them is connected to an outdoor sensor as well, and that outdoor information would be communicated through TechMarNet to the other 654. Again, we're showing our freeze protection aquastat. In this case, whenever we approach freezing, it's going to turn off this pump here. You'll see later on in the presentation that one of the features we do have for car wash systems is that now we can operate the snowmelt on a schedule. So that's a perfect application for a car wash where you could have it programmed to come into effect only during the hours of operation. And we'll look at scheduling later in the webinar training series. Welcome to our last application, which is application 7, a multi-zone electric application. Here we are showing two snowmelt zones. We can in fact have up to 12 zones with the snowmelt control 654. Each of the zones is controlled by its own 654, and we are connected to our three sensor options, the 090 or 094, the 095, and the slab sensor 072 or 073. Now each of those 654s is connected to an electrical contactor, which in turn is going to energize the electric cables for the melting operation. Because this is a multi-zone system, we will configure zone priority. And what's nice about the 654 is we do have a special priority setting for electric applications. It would be the conditional priority setting. And the way that works is that only one of the contactors is allowed to be on at any given time. And we do that to avoid large instantaneous demands and associated large surcharges from our electric utility company. We'll talk more about zone priority later in the TechMar training webinar series, and we'll look at the three priority settings for electric and hydronic applications at that time. Because this is not a hydronic system, we are able to use the auxiliary relay to operate some alert equipment. So we would connect to a third-party alert device, which could either give an audible alarm or perhaps even trigger an email that could be sent to a smartphone so that we can be notified of any issues immediately in our system. You'll notice we are connected to one outdoor sensor, and that outdoor temperature will be communicated to any other 654s on our system through the TechMar net communication. Now we have looked at all 7 of the featured applications for the snowmelt control 654. If you're already anxious for the electrical information, you could always fast forward to our very last training segment, which will be training segment 8, and that will go over the mechanical along with the electrical diagrams, and will also introduce to you the essential settings for each of these 7 featured applications. So in summary for this training segment, we looked at the equipment compatibility for the 654. So it is a snowmelt control that can operate an on-off or modulating boiler, and we can also operate an electrical contactor for electric applications. We took a look at the wiring terminal, so we have a good idea of what we can connect to the 654. And we also looked at how that would affect connecting to a system pump or providing an enable to a boiler, how we would need to use those isolation relays. And lastly, we looked at the mechanical diagrams for the 7 featured applications so that you all have a very solid understanding of the types of applications the 654 has been designed to control. I hope you stay tuned for the next training block where we start diving into the new features on the snowmelt control 654.